Last week, we looked at one of the last great films of the silent era, something obviously worth preserving. This week, we'll be looking at something quite different, a B movie which in isolation doesn't seem very worth remembering, but it holds a very important place in history. This film has the honour of being the very first proper talkie, and it's probably not the one you're thinking of. My name is Robin, and this is Film Friday from the Community Broadcasting Network. Our last episode was about 1928's The Man Who Laughs, which quite possibly single handedly changed my entire outlook on what early cinema was, or at least could be, like. If you remember, it featured synchronised sound but no spoken dialogue. By this point, the industry was awash with new ways to add sound to film. In fact, the previous year saw The Jazz Singer hit screens. This is widely understood to be the first talkie, but actually, that film only had a couple of minutes of spoken dialogue across its whole runtime. So, staying in 1928, this week I'd like to draw your attention to Lights in New York. This B movie is the first true talkie, with absolutely every piece of dialogue being provided by the synchronised soundtrack. I'll be upfront, I found this piece of cinema incredibly forgettable, but that just means we should work even harder to make sure it is remembered as the important historic moment that it was. To manage expectations, if you watched The Man Who Laughs on my recommendation, that film had a budget of $1 million and it shows. Lights in New York? Well, it was made on a much smaller budget of 23,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's about a million in today's money. Certainly not a small amount of money for us plebs, but by the standards of Hollywood, it's not much. Just something to keep in mind going forward. Set against the backdrop of Prohibition, the film follows Eddie and Jean as they pack up their small town lives and head to New York, with the promise of running a popular barbershop. Once there, it becomes apparent that the shop is actually a front for a speakeasy, and they find themselves tangled in a world of crime. I wish I could be as complimentary of this film as I was of The Man Who Laughs, but it's hard to find many redeeming features. The plot is really quite thin and straightforward, with the major beats being dreadfully predictable. Spoken dialogue may be the film's standout feature, but this too falls short, with the delivery being incredibly flat, though it has to be acknowledged that it's not unexpected given the novelty of the technology. Actors hadn't yet got the knack of speaking on screen, not to mention the limitations of microphone technology at the time. Visually speaking, there are a few moments of interest, but for the most part we're stuck with static wide shots, this again being a limitation imposed by the new technology. That said, it's not all bad news. Sound did allow for some novel techniques. Scenes set in the antagonist's nightclub are brought alive by the use of music, which makes it feel like it exists in a real space. Spoken dialogue also allows for minor exchanges to happen in passing, which makes the world of the film feel much more fleshed out. I'm not alone in thinking it was a bit rubbish. Critics at the time were broadly very negative. Though some acknowledged the important leap forward in technology, the general feeling was that being a talkie wasn't enough to rescue it from its other flaws. Audiences, on the other hand, flocked to see it regardless. Despite the cool critical reception, Lights in New York still went on to become the ninth highest grossing film of the year, with box office takings of around 1.2 million. As bad and forgettable as this film is, it's undeniable that it's worth preserving, no question whatsoever. This shitty little B movie is an important part of the fabric of cinema history. I can't exactly say that without Lights in New York there's no Star Wars or Citizen Kane or anything else, because of course if it hadn't been this, it would have been something else. Talkies were inevitable. That's the thing though, this is the film that took that particular spot in the history books, and it would be wrong to consign it to the dustbin of history just because it's not very good. I watched the film twice in the course of preparing this review. Being completely honest, on my first watch I absolutely hated it, and wasn't sure I could find anything interesting to say. Upon rewatching though, my opinion softened. For the second viewing I developed the understanding that I wasn't watching some piece of fine art, but more of a commercial experiment, and I think it's obvious with nearly a century of hindsight that it was absolutely worthwhile. It does seem absurd now to think of a time when Hollywood had to ask the question, do the public want to hear the people on screen talk? But they did have to ask, and the success of this mediocre film gave them their answer. If my relentless negativity hasn't put you off, or even if you're just curious, you can watch Lights in New York here on the Community Broadcasting Network, along with many other great films and shows. You can also check out our review of The Man Who Laughs, And be sure to subscribe for more reviews in the future. Thanks for watching.